Welcome all. Thank you coming back to Leaders in the Accounting and Finance series. And it's all about giving students insights into, well, what is it like 2 years out of university and working in the accounting and finance profession. And so we're grateful to have Benjamin Ho with us, and Benjamin is a 7-year audit manager of EY. We have Joyce Chia, who is a FP&A controller for Schlumberger, which is an oil services company. And you're 7 years out from Monash too, is that right, Joyce?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, okay. And Aaron, you're 5 years out and you've had 2.8 years of audit experience. So I think that's wonderful. Benjamin, would you like to just add anything to the introduction?
Oh, sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to be, thanks for having me here today. Like what you said, I'm a senior manager in Ernst & Young. I'm actually a former fellow students together with Joyce as well. We are both students from Monash University. So just to disclose, we both know each other, and hence nice to meet you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Joyce, would you like to add to my introduction?
I've been out from Monash, I think 7 years as well, and I'm a bit different from majority of the students because most of the people, once they graduate, they will go to like the Big Four auditing firms. But yeah, no, I didn't, and I chose all the commercial part. Yeah, so now I'm currently attached to Schlumberger. Yeah, as the FP&A controller. Yeah.
And Aaron, would you like to add to my introduction?
Oh, right. So I've actually just came back from EY Singapore. Yeah, so I've decided to take a career break for the moment, but I'm also exploring because there's a commercial side of things as well as the business side. So I'm just looking at both at the moment. Yeah.
How long did you spend at EY in Singapore?
Just a few months over there. The COVID situation was not easy to deal with.
Oh, and before that, you're in EY Malaysia, is it?
Yes, correct.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so Dr. Janthi, would you like to start with some technical questions?
I'd like to thank the three of you all for actually taking your valuable time and coming in for this informal session. I think you all know me. I'm not sure. I'm Janthi Thresingam. My area of interest is basically international financial reporting standards. And can you all just tell me before I go on to the major questions, what is the career path that you all took? Which means after graduating in Monash, did you all take on any professional courses?
Yeah, for me, I do. I take on the MICPA courses actually. Yeah, right. I know actually MICPA from Monash because back then when I was in Monash, I had some event and got to know MICPA and got to know that they have those dual certificates, something like that. That's where I took on a bit. Yeah.
Okay. And what about you, Benjamin?
Basically same as Joyce as well. In terms of my professional membership, I'm also taking MICPA. The reason being is it gives me that dual membership with CAA and Z.
Yes. Yeah. And Aaron, yourself?
Yeah, similar with them, but I have the third one, which is the MIA.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Which is Master of International Accounting. Okay. Is that correct, Aaron?
No, but I forgot the full name. I have to look it up later. I just pay when my dues are here.
It's the Malaysian Institute of Accountants.
Malaysian Institute. I apologize. We'll get that right. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe I'll just start off. As I think Prof. Neil has told you all, the purpose of this session is to share with our students what is entailed for them once they've got their undergraduate qualifications and how it's going to be like in their working experience. So I teach the accounting standards, third-year accounting standards. I think you all know that. So my first thing is, do you face any challenges when it comes to the proper application of accounting standards to specific transactions? when I mean by proper application, I'm looking at any technical issues that you all face, or secondly, whether you have to, how do you face any challenges when you're looking at the optimal structure of specific transactions that you have to take note of? Can I start with Benjamin?
Sure. Okay. Because I'm coming from an audit background, in terms of the technical aspect or technical difficulty in applying new accounting standards, like the recent one being IFRS 16, IFRS 15, IFRS 9, my observation is that the ISB and IFIC were actually quite good this time in terms of how they drafted the accounting standards, in the sense where they were very clear about specific areas about how certain transactions should be recorded. So for me, as an auditor's perspective, my challenge is not so much on the technical interpretation of what the standard setters are trying to express in those new accounting standards, but rather is trying to educate my clients about how they can, to get them up to speed to the latest updates in the accounting standards, and how they can plan and prepare for it.
Okay. So what you are saying is, Aaron, they have actually structured the standard so well that you will know how to go about the technical recording and so on.
Yes. So that's for example, like the preceding standard of IFRS 15, which is IAS 18, it's less than like 100 pages. But IFRS 15, if I'm not mistaken, is like 200 over pages. So they were very good this time in the sense that they tried to cover all bases. At areas where they couldn't, they issued like a basis of conclusion, technical interpretations to help us along the way with that.
Okay. Joyce, I know that you are in the oil industry. So coming to the extractive industry, the standards, were there any technical issues that you had problems in recording and so
on? In terms of that, I mean, those new accounting standard that actually Benjamin mentioned, in terms of that is okay technically wise, just that because I'm the commercial side, right? So what challenge I have is that to implement it is kind of hard because it has the changes in terms of the financial indicators of the performance that will impact those people's KPIs, right? So yeah, that's where I get it hard to convince people that no, this is where the new accounting standard, and it actually has a massive changes, especially like the IFRS 16. A lot used to be like probably an expenses P&L, and now it's capex, those kind of things that could change people KPI significantly, and that's where people start to like questioning. But yeah, in terms of technical to implement it is kind of easy. Like Benjamin says, the standards are kind of
trying to convince the group of companies that they should adapt the new standard is where the issue is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Aaron?
I think they pretty much covered it, but I think the main issue for those in the Big Four would be because we are often given a lot of trainings into our MFRS and IFRS, and whatever that's in textbook is often difficult to be implemented in the commercial side because sometimes our clients themselves may not have the training required. And as Joyce mentioned, it may impact their KPI as well. You know, they have to change it. Like for example, leases have now changed. They have to either do a full retrospective or partial retrospective method. And to many of the clients, you know, they will be like, oh, what's that? You know, could you tell us? And then we have to spend the time teaching. And even after we teach, sometimes they may not be able to do it because their bosses will be like, you know, is this the way? You know, is there other ways? And all of this will cost time. So I think the main issue is the gap in the knowledge between both parties, between us who have training and other side who may or may not have as much. Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
But the difficult standard that would have come across to all three of you all would be the IFRS 9, the on loans and the impairment laws.
That's one of the challenges that we face as well. But it kind of depends on the nature of the entity as well. IFRS 9 affects different entities differently. I would say that the biggest impact would be to the financial services organizations, which are your banks, because they are not just impacted by their model to actually calculate impairment losses is much more complicated than what we would typically do for other non-financial services organizations, let's say for manufacturing companies or property developer companies.
Right.
Yeah, and in addition to that, there are things like the valuation for the classification and measurement of those financial instruments. So those are the difficulty that financial services organization face. For myself personally, I'm not in that department. I do not audit financial services organization. So what I would see that in terms of IFRS 9, like what you say, Dr. Janti, the number one, the difficulty is that now we are introducing a new concept, the expected credit loss model. People are now expected to try and forecast what would their, how would their historical default debt rates change, especially in light of this current COVID-19 situation. There are additional estimation uncertainties involved, which makes things more complicated, both from the accounting side and on the auditing side. And that touches a bit more about like what previously you had a question about like what's the optimal structuring of a specific transaction. This is kind of where there's opportunities for us as auditors to provide value-added services as well, or advice as well, because in terms of the adoption of the expected credit loss model, there are a couple of practical expedients that a company can apply to try to minimize the impact of the amount of work that they have to do to implement it. So, for example, so we all know that IFRS 9, the thing is that we now need to assess the change in the credit risk rates of our of the customers of the company, but there's actually a practical expedient for a company to choose to disregard that if they choose to. But there is also pros and cons in that aspect. The good thing about it is that in terms of the accounting staff, less effort is required. Their ability to meet their financial reporting deadline is more timely. On the bad side is that by applying a very simplified practical expedient, the impact to the financial statements, to the bottom line, would have been bigger. The losses that you recognize would have been bigger had you not applied the practical expedient, had you been more specific in your expected credit loss assessment.
Provision. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. The next question I'm looking at is like what we said. So we've already covered the challenges that you will face in implementing new standards with your clients. What about this aspect of unification of accounting policy for the group of companies? Is that an issue for you? Because you're looking at a group of companies and try to unify the best accounting policy for the whole group of companies. Is that a challenge for you all?
Yeah, so sorry, I will just go ahead to answer that question first. Yes, this is a challenge for me because it kind of depends on like what country or the group of companies are operating in. Let's say if I was auditing a holding company in Malaysia who has components in Indonesia and Thailand. Indonesia and Thailand, in terms of their progress of the adoption of accounting standards, they are behind IFRS. They are also behind Malaysia, MFRS. Malaysia is kind of in line with IFRS. So if I'm working with components which are in UK or in Singapore, there's not that much of an issue. Yeah. But for Indonesia, who was 1 year behind IFRS, meaning that if Malaysia or the world adopts, England adopts IFRS 16 for the financial year ended 31st December 2019, Indonesia will only adopt it in 2020. So in that respect, there's a lot of coordination required, because from the perspective of the component organization or the subsidiaries, they do not see the need to apply these accounting standards because they still have 1 year buffer. But it's up to us to try and convince them to do so, or not the group consolidated financial numbers will not be in compliance with IFRS.
That's right. Joyce, do you share that with Benjamin? If you're
for my side, normally we will follow the group, which we will adopt it. And if the locally they don't, we will do a locally statutory adjustment. So for my side, because I do in this commercial, right, normally they will standardize like one company, they will adopt it at group level so that for consolidation it's easier in that way.
Easier.
So yeah, when it comes to locally, if there's no, then we do a locally adjustment to the statutory. That's how normally it does. So in terms of unity, normally it's one go at the company to implement
Sure.
it. Yeah.
Aaron, any contribution regarding this?
No, most of my companies are local Malaysian, so it's quite straightforward. But yeah, it's true. Indonesians do follow their own their own IFRS per se. So I did do a company with them once on this plantation of theirs, and there were gaps between our MFRS and theirs. And to resolve it, we had to go through a meeting with their CFO to sit down and explain to them, because my department is more on the advisory side.
Sure.
So yeah, we don't delve too deep, but it does impact things like our impairment review and impairment processes, and we still need to bring up when we notice there are gaps. But most of the time, we will then liaise with the auditors, who will then liaise with them straight.
That's good. That's good. One last question before Shyamala takes over. Can you just tell me what is the biggest professional challenge that you are facing, short-term, long-term? Is there any major challenges you all are facing as senior staff?
Benjamin.
Yeah, so in terms of short-term challenges, I would say that for myself, COVID has been a challenge.
Right.
In terms of, because coming from where I am as an auditor, the way that we usually do our audit works, that we usually have to be on field, as in to visit the client, conduct the audit work. It's very hard to do that right now in terms of the movement restriction orders that are in place. And after that has been lifted as well, you always worry about like the well-being of the people in your team and the people in EY for my case. So that's the short-term challenge that we're facing.
Okay.
In long-term challenge, I think my long-term challenge has been consistent throughout. As an auditor, I sometimes tend to find a struggle between obtaining a balance between my work life, my personal life, as well as my health. Yeah.
Right. Right. Aaron?
Yeah. So short term, as you mentioned, it's also due to the COVID. You know, like
Sure.
since I was in the advisory department, COVID has caused a lot of jobs to freeze up. Not many
Right.
companies will want to enter into merger acquisitions or valuations of their company.
That's right.
But restructuring is an area which is, I expect the business there to boom soon, because a lot of companies are going under. So the corporate restructuring side should rise. So it's a short-term thing, I think, is like an audit. I think audit, we can think of it as, you know, this, if will this recording be shown to students?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So for all the students, you know, if you are afraid, you know, there must be times in your life you're thinking that, you know, nothing could happen, the world would just go on as it is, and you see, bam, overnight COVID destroyed a lot of things, a lot of business went under, people's well-beings are affected. Now, if you were to join audit, like Benjamin, it's kind of bread and butter. So you will always need auditors. So if you need a motivation to join audit, just always remember, it's a secure job. It's a place you can learn, but it's also a place where you feel secure, you know, and that it's also quite structured in an audit firm. It's very simple: associate, senior associate, manager, senior managers, director, partner. The route is clear, and we have so much training. You know, that's the best thing about the Big Four, is that they give us a lot of MFRS trainings. We go for it. Seniors, they get it. AMs, they get it. I was an AM when I left, so I got it as well. So short term for myself personally was COVID has caused advisory jobs to freeze up. But long term, I think this would probably be shared by all of us, would be the knowledge. You know, we can never know everything. We always think like, okay, we know this much, it's going to be enough. And then next year, bam, something new comes up. New revision to the MFRS, new revision to IFRS. We have to then adopt it. And then when we adopt it, our clients will be like, oh, can we do it? Do we need to do it? Then you have to convince them there's the people's factor in it. So I think the long-term challenge would be, how can we increase our own knowledge, but at the same time help others who we are working with reach the same level or higher? Maybe they can help us as well. It's always no man's an island. It's always a give and take thing. You know, I give you knowledge, you give me some in return, and that's how we can keep improving. So yeah, knowledge would be the long-term struggle that we all are definitely still facing every day. And the short term, I think, it's just the COVID impacting a lot of jobs. Yeah.
I totally agree with you. Even though I was in Joyce's situation, after graduating as a chartered certified accountant, I joined the corporate world. But as you said rightfully, that in the audit, there's always a job for you. So I totally agree with that. Joyce, you're quite senior in your company. So do you have any professional challenges that you're facing?
Yeah. In this short term, definitely COVID definitely impact a lot, especially I'm in oil industry. Plus with the oil price crash, is really, it impacts a lot in terms of that the business not going well, job freeze, and they're actually cutting a lot of headcounts, especially us in the finance department, right, in this period of time. Yeah, this is the short term. In terms of long term, I would say people are talking about digitalization nowadays, so everyone wants automation, those kind of things. So I think even at accounting or finance this field, we need to have the skill set of digital, the automation, those skill sets. I think that is where it's important. I think it applies to audit field, those as well. Yeah,
that's so true. Yeah, thank you so much for giving me such a good feedback on the standard application. So I will pass it over to Dr. Shyamala.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jayanti. Okay, because I'm doing the auditing unit at Monash. Auditors normally work in groups. So I'm just wondering, as an auditor, when you're planning your audit, what group dynamic problems or challenges did you have? Because I think you were all on a lockdown, isn't it? So if you are going to be taking on an assignment, what sort of challenges did you have?
Benjamin?
Yeah, so being the auditor in this cohort, I'll take that question. The challenge is like what I said just now. Number one, you're always concerned about the safety of the people in your audit team. So while your client, so as our audit, we are usually performing our audit on site, meaning in client's place. If your client were to ask you to come to their place to do the audit on an urgent basis, the worry that you have, number one, is in the sense is client COVID-19, have they applied the SOP pertaining to COVID-19? Are they safe to enter? That's the first challenge. And the other challenge is because of what has happened with COVID, there are certain protocols that we have applied internally as well in the organization. And one of it being that we will have a teaming arrangement where the staff force of the engagement will be split into two. One where they go to client place and another one where they were to work remotely from client's place. The benefit for this being that if a client were to be touch on wood, but if a client were to have COVID-19, the entire audit team will not be affected, but other half of the audit team will be affected, and we still have a continuity plan or worst case scenario plan where we have half of the staff force working. So in terms of the challenges, that's what we typically face in terms of audit. Another part that we see is in terms of, for my side, team management, project management, because it's always better when you get to see your team members face to face and get updates to them and communicate your message to them. Right now, it's harder to do that. We have to learn to try to use the technologies that's afforded to us, like Zoom, Teams, to try and do that. There's always, but in that sense, there's always a bit of inefficiency in terms of that you will take longer time to get your message across. And the last thing, I suppose, is in terms of the team motivation, their motivation level. Whenever you get to meet up with them, it's always easier to try to build a more positive working environment and try to motivate them. The challenge now is how, without meeting them face to face, how can you continue to try to motivate them and to give them the development they require to succeed as a professional?
Wow.
Adrian, is you on your audit as well? Adrian, you got any comments?
Aaron,
sorry.
Aaron.
Sorry.
Sorry, could you repeat that question one more time?
About the challenges in terms of group dynamics as an audit team during the COVID lockdown, what challenges did you have?
Okay, so when I was in Singapore, when I joined in, I was only in the office like for a week or two, and because it's advisory nature kind of work, we are required definitely to be more client-facing because this is not a statutory requirement anymore. This is a client's requirement. They want us to come in to get a certain job done. And because of the COVID, it can get difficult because there are a lot of SOPs to be followed, like how many people can be in the room. And sometimes the team could be big. We need everyone to be on site to be part of the whole thing, but it's difficult. So what we will, to compensate for that, we do have Teams meetings as well as Zoom meetings where half of us will probably do it from our homes or the office and the other half would be there. And whoever who is there, if we have any questions, we can then relay it and then they help relay it for us. Difficulty would be the information sharing part because sometimes whatever we want to ask may not be clearly conveyed to the other side. I mean, we have only limited time with the clients as well. And I think the biggest challenge was getting our message across and they getting back the answers to us. So in the end, to compensate for all this, what we do in the end is we just send a long comprehensive emails with all the questions we want. It beats the human factor. We will not have the human touch required because especially in advisory, we need to be very, I do not want to use the word client pleasing, but we need to be on good terms with the client. This is a one-off business. Like audit, I understand it's mostly recurring. So the good news about audit would be if we cannot meet up the clients, whoever who was on the job would have a chance to know what's going to happen, like what the clients want. But if we were to get a new client facing, like for us advisory, we get new clients who just come to us for one-off thing. And advisory, they will just pay us one lump sum. We want to make sure we get everything all the requirements that is required for the job. We want to make sure that we understand our clients' needs. And that is difficult because of the COVID, as mentioned earlier. So it was a tough time, but to compensate for it, as I mentioned, we have emails, we have our Teams meetings, but it still beats the human factor at the end of the day. But it can't be helped. Hopefully a vaccine will be found eventually, and things get better for every industry, not just the audit, commercial included as well.
Joyce, because you'll be working with the auditors, so during the COVID lockdown, how did you actually manage to meet up with the auditors to discuss your financial statements?
I don't meet them physically. We are on Zoom.
Oh, you didn't meet? Okay.
They have Zoom or they have another Teams, those kind of meeting. Yeah. We are all on virtual meetings nowadays, and it's 100%. Yeah, that's how we work on.
Oh, okay.
Face auditor. Yeah.
So, did you have any challenges with that?
In terms of auditors, that's fine because I'm kind of close with them that we have all these virtual meetings. We are okay, but just that I think Benjamin did mention or Aaron did mention as well, those team warriors to manage the teams, that's the harder part because we do face to face, so the message convey is slow and yeah, that will be more on that part.
Okay. All right. The next question I wanted to ask you is because especially international clients, how did you, during the planning stage of the audit, carry out the preliminary risk assessment during the COVID lockdown? And you've got international clients as well. Before you engaged on the audit?
Yeah, so I think I'll take that question first.
Yes.
So in terms, for me, in terms of the risk assessment, regardless of whether that client is a local client or international client, there are still challenges that you will face in terms of making the preliminary risk assessment for that client. I would say that being local or international does not affect that so much as compared to the nature of the industry that they are in. So for example, as you can see, those companies that are in tourism industries or property industries, the main risk, the biggest risk that you always afraid of in light of the COVID is in terms of its liquidity and its going concern. Now, given that sales had tremendously slowed down for them, will there be a concern that the company will not be able to operate as a going concern, i.e. being that can remain liquid and sustain their business for the next 12 months from the date of the end of the financial year. So that's one of the challenges that we face. Another challenge is that because coming from an audit perspective, the way that we typically gain assurance on the financial statements numbers is through two ways, which is on the control reliance procedures as well as the substantive audit procedures. Substantive audit being vouching to invoices, everything. Control is we look at what controls that the client has put in place, and we try to see whether or not we can test and place reliance on those controls. What we notice is that given that most clients are also working remotely, given the COVID-19 situation, there is certain controls there might be certain controls that might be forgo. For example, because those controls have to be performed on site at their premise, but now that they have to work from home, they cannot perform those controls. And then the challenge for them is to design a new control that can work for them to execute from the comfort of their house. And for us auditors then is to understand what are the changes to the controls that they make and how us as auditors can design a new audit strategy to test those new controls.
Okay, so you had all these teething problems. But how did you overcome it? Because it was quite sudden, isn't it, the lockdown? So
yes.
So how did you go around it so fast for the audits?
I think the key thing is that there has to be a very open line of communication between the auditors and the client. Whichever changes that the client is making, whichever difficulty that the client is making, if they were to flag it up upfront to the auditors and we resolve it together in the discussion, it's easier to resolve that way and faster as well. Mm-hmm.
Joyce, what about yourself? If you were in communication with the auditors and they were doing a risk assessment of your business, because you're in oil and gas, I think that was one of the risky areas, isn't it? Yes. How would you do a risk assessment profile?
How would I do the risk? I do show them like the profile where we are in the next, because we did the forecast and budgets, we know where we are. Estimates. So we do talk to them that that is where we are, and indeed the activity lows out. So that's where some actions that have been taken by the company to this in these tough situations, right? So what are the cost controls, especially the cost measures that we have taken significantly to mitigate all these low in terms of the activities. Yeah. So this has been shared with the auditors as well through some walkthroughs, those kind of calls.
Okay. All right. So it was mainly through discussion. Okay. Aaron, but your advisory, would you have any issues like this?
We do deal with clients, like asking them what do they think of their company's prospects. So they will normally send us a projection, like 5 years or 10 years. And then we will sort of evaluate it, and we will then raise our questions to them, asking them like, we also use ratios a lot, like current ratios, liquidity ratios, etc. That's how we form the basis, and we also look at the prior years, how did they do, and if let's say they overinflate their results in the coming years, we will normally rely on the prior data to say, you said that your company will grow this much in the next 5 to 10 years, but prior years didn't show this. What's your reasoning? And then they will have to provide us like a written memo per se, like saying, revenue will be increasing because of this, because we will have, normally this will be more of an inside information. They will tell us not to share it. Like they tell us, actually we are going to introduce this new product, for example, and we think that this new product can penetrate the market as there's no one else in this country who's doing it. Something like this. Different companies will have a different sort of reasoning, but this is where we will then evaluate it. And then we also see they will have things like discount rate and then impairments, for example, they do for their companies. So our advisory will also look into that, and we will also do our own independent review on it, form our own discount rate, and then we will then discuss with the auditors. That's where like Benjamin's team will come in and sit down with us. We'll share our insights with them, and then he will then share the clients, and we'll try to find a middle ground to give a reasonable risk assessment of their projections, whether does it need to go lower or it can be maintained, things like that.
So you work together with the audit team as well in advisory?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Then one of the challenges I know was in terms of inventory site inspection, isn't it? Because of the COVID-19, you couldn't have that. So how did you actually overcome this challenge?
Yes, Dr. Shyamala, you're totally right. Inventories is really a challenge for us this year, especially for companies in Malaysia with financial year ending on 31st March, because the lockdown happened, I think, in mid-March until the end of April. So there are two ways to tackle this issue. Number one is to see whether or not the client is able to do a virtual stock count, because certain companies are able to obtain an exemption from the government on the movement restriction orders, especially if you are essential services company. So they have clients that are still on site, and they can perform, and with the help of technology, with Zoom calls and such, that we are able to perform virtual stock count. But in terms of the level of scrutiny that we need to we need to pay attention to in terms of a virtual stock count is much more tedious compared to when we do a physical stock count. Because a virtual stock count, probably what they're going to do is they're going to hold a phone and show it. The phone only gives you a limited sight of vision. As auditors, we are always required to be aware of the entire warehouse area to see whether or not there's any stock write-offs to be aware of or not. So I would say that virtual stock count is actually the harder way to go. That's usually done when the reporting needs to be done on a very urgent basis. The second alternative is to wait for the movement control order to be lifted. So that comes, I think, in the month of May or June.
Yes.
And when we do we do the stock count then. So the timing of which we do the stock count now does not match with the financial year end of the company. But then the company then would now need to do stock reconciliation, or what we call a stock roll backwards. What is the stock movement from the date of the financial year end of the company until the date of the stock takes? Usually the types of inventory movement that we will usually see is the sales of inventory, the purchase of inventories, and the consumption of raw materials to work in progress to finished goods. So all this, if the company's management or financial staff or the finance function, has a very detailed, keeps a proper records of this. The challenge now is just tedious because there are more volumes of transactions that we have to go through, and that's the kind of difficulty that we have.
Okay. What about you, Joyce? In terms of your oil and gas, how would you overcome this?
Yes. For my side, wow, thank God. I did the stock count just before the lockdown. And that's why the result is that, luckily we have planned earlier, and we have done it early after March. And I wow, this hassle had been gone through. Because if we had do it later, like what Ben say, oh my God, we have to do all those kind of reconciliation. Luckily, my team and I managed to schedule it right before early after March, and we really so I didn't really go through the hassle actually.
Okay, because when you did your studies, we normally focused on manufacturing companies, isn't it? So how was it different when you started working in the oil and gas industry?
Actually, oil and gas, because it's a service company, right? Actually, they have a lot of manufacturing, because we manufacture the equipment ourselves that we provide to the oil and gas to perform those explorations. So in my services, although the services actually is a kind of manufacturing in terms of the equipment, of the tools to provide to the oil and gas company, the operators. Yeah.
So do you have a supply chain for your manufacturing?
Yeah. We do have the supply chain, and we internally actually
okay. So you didn't have any problems during the COVID-19 lockdown from your supply chain?
In terms of that, we do have, actually, I face a massive problem during this COVID. Okay, I don't have a problem in terms of stock take. I have a problem in terms of transporting my equipment because my equipment is built in other countries and need to bring to the locations. Yeah, I face a massive problem with that. That caused a delays that we need to negotiate with client to see if we can delay the projects a bit, or we have to pay some penalties and even higher costs to fly those equipments to the country or the locations. Yes.
Oh, you have to fly them, is it? Okay.
Yes. And it's tough somewhere. It's not every schedule I have to fly. We need to pick somewhere, right? I incur a massive cost for that actually.
I'm sure a lot of clients would have come up with legal suits also, isn't it? Together with all this, the delay and all that.
Yes,
Did you encounter that too?
we encountered, because also at the same time, the client side also encountered delays, right, in the rig
Yeah.
at their side, so projects delayed.
Right.
But it incurred more costs at the end still, because even they delay, I need to incur more costs to bring those equipments to the location.
True.
Yeah. That is a lot actually. This COVID actually, I need to control the cost, but at the same time, I need to incur more costs. Yeah.
So that had affected your financial statements for the year?
It does impact actually. So we have to give and take. So probably we have to manage that some of those nice to have things, we have to probably delay them. Yeah, that's what nice to have costs that we try to incur. We have actually delayed all those costs to give priority to incur this higher cost for this COVID. Yeah.
What type of costs are that, Joyce? What's some of the nice to have costs?
Nice to have costs. Like, okay, in terms of redressing, instead of having more redressers, we actually reduce the redressers. But at the same time, we make sure that it meets those safety requirements. But the times or frequency of it, we try to reduce it to, because it's we still meet the safety, but the frequency we try to remove it. Yeah. So those are like nice to have. It is quality will be slightly dropped in that sense in terms of safety, but it's still meeting the safety requirement.
Yes, your industry, the safety is very
Yeah. So we still have to meet that, but to balance it out the cost. Yeah, that's what we try to do. Yeah.
Aaron, do you have any advisory this sort of issues?
Oh, thank goodness we don't need to do stock count. When I was an auditor, I recalled this kind of issues. The only thing I can think of that was similar to what's happening now was I was doing a oil and gas stock take back in Terengganu. There was the area tend to flood a lot. So one of the ways that myself and my manager got around it was we asked our clients to actually take a video for us of the place, as well as the tag. Because for oil and gas, it's a specialized stock count where you actually dip in the stick to sort of measure it, and it's difficult if you cannot be on site. But there are some people who are already there, and the area that we are supposed to do the stock count was flooded. They actually were quite resourceful. They came up, they made a makeshift sampan, makeshift. I can't believe they did it, but they actually did it. They went towards it. They did a video call to show us, like, we're dipping it in, can you accept, like, we're doing this is live. During that time, there was no other options. And it was either I stay there till the flood subsides, or we just take it. But sometimes I think, especially now the COVID, I'm not sure if, like, for Benjamin as an SM, would you all be open to new ways of doing stock take if the COVID were to persist? Like, would a live stream or video be acceptable, let's say?
Yeah. So like I said, like virtual stock count actually is an acceptable method for us. But it's just that when we do virtual stock count, there are additional audit considerations that we have to make as well in terms of the integrity of the audio stream and such. So yes, we technically right now at the organization that I work in, we do have procedures, SOP on how actually we want to do a virtual call.
How did this? Sorry. Okay, correct,
I'm just to share, in times like this, and when times we cannot really do the physical stock take, I think moving forward, we would probably have to find a different way which will not compromise the integrity of the audit or our work, but at the same time be able to achieve the results we want, or as close as possible. Yeah.
So how did this impact your auditor's report as well? Did you have to do an emphasis of matter in the auditor's report?
As long as we can gain assurance on the have comfort on the procedures that we are doing, there's no emphasis of matter that is required in terms of this. But I think in Malaysia, it's funny that you mentioned emphasis of matter. What we observed that what most company puts in emphasis of matter in light of COVID are not towards a stock take, but more on a going concern, whether or not the company is able to operate for national months.
Okay. So the last question I'd like to ask is, when you graduated as a student, what were the challenges you had? Once was in the commercial side and then the audit side. Did you have any challenges like knowledge gap or things like that?
Yeah, so I'd just like to give a shout out to Monash University, Malaysia, for the extremely high quality of education that's afforded to me. So technically, but honestly speaking as well, I do not have any challenges in terms of technical wise when I'm going from Monash to my working environment. I think I shared with Dr. Janti as well. As a first year audit associate, what I feel or what I realize is that basically there are two in terms of knowledge that I gained from Monash, there are two aspects to it: the auditing sides of it, as well as the accounting issues. So in both cases, I felt that what was covered by Monash were actually very applicable to my work up until I was a senior in EY, and the level of knowledge that I've gotten got me up to a level of senior even when I joined as a new associate. And I can give an example for that as well. I still distinctively remember me sitting in Dr. Janti's class on biological asset, 2012. I was learning biological asset from Dr. Janti. In Malaysia, the plantation companies are only adopting IFRS in their initial application is for financial year ended 31st December 2018. So I was like 6 years ahead of my time back then.
Okay. Wow. Very good. Thank you, Benjamin.
Okay, so also a shout out, but not to just Monash Malaysia, but I was also in Monash Australia.
Right.
And I think the education level from both helped me out in my audit, because but one of the challenges faced, I think most fresh grads would go through, would be choosing their professional paper. Because on one hand, we have the degree, so we do the accounting and finance paper, Monash Malaysia, and I think it's both Malaysia and Australia. I was about a year here and 2 years there. So when I came back, I thought the degree alone would be sufficient to get ahead in the audit program. But as I was doing audit, I realized if you were to do a professional paper, it would help your understanding much better, because it also touches our tutors, our lecturers are also real part-time professionals, so they both work and teach. So going through them would help us understand how to apply whatever we learn in university as well as a professional paper to our work. But of course, as a fresh grad, the challenge was both working and studying. You know, on one hand, for the past 21 years, we were just studying, and then overnight, you're in audit. You know, peak period comes, you are going to work, and then you have to apply leave, you have to do your professional paper. So for those in Monash, since you're in the Australian program, you'll be either given a choice of CPA or the MECPA, CAA, and ZEC. And my advice would be, before you pursue either of the papers, try to have a strong foundation in your uni. Do not take uni as just a time to play. It is a time it's still the best time of your life. I agree with you. You should still enjoy it a little bit. But I would ask you to also pay special emphasis on the accounting and finance papers, especially if you're intending to do a professional paper. It's not as easy as it sounds. You know, you're no longer a full-time student. You're working, you're studying, you have to juggle the needs of your own as well as your bosses, your clients. You know, all this could be a shock for those who are making the transition from studying to working. So when I was a student, you know, I was given the choice between both. I did the MECPA paper because well, everyone was doing it, so yeah, I just did it as well. And I'm lucky to say that I managed to pass everything on the first attempt. There are friends of mine who were not so fortunate, and it's not their fault. You know, even if you fail a paper, the worst mistake or challenge that I noticed, those who fail will be they think they're stupid. No, that's not true. Actually, the problem is you may not have the time. You are working, you're studying. So how do you find the balance? Like Benjamin mentioned, you know, one of the challenges working long term will be to find work-life balance between your work and your life. But especially for those who have a paper, you know, to fail one paper, I think it takes a long time to redo the next. Because I think MECPA, I don't know about CPA, but MECPA is like 3 SEMs a year. My time there was only 2 SEMs. So if you failed one, you have to do it again next year. So I think it was only 2. I'm not so sure, but yeah. So you have to like guarantee you passed it. At the same time, you have to make sure your work quality is not compromised. So my only advice to students during this time would be, get your timetable early. Try to roughly see when your exams will be. One of my methods would be I tend to take leave from January straight. I will book the leaves I need for my paper already, at the same time, I'll be upfront with my manager. I'll tell him, look, during this time, I will be on my study break. Of course, if you need me to work, I'll come back to help, but I hope to have at least disruptions as possible. So could we like try to schedule things around? If I have the OT to make sure my job is done, I will do it. But it is a job end of the day.
Right.
So I would make sure my job work quality is not compromised. At the same time, I also have to look after my own papers needs. And I'm glad that today I've done the MICPA. I was in the Big Four already. The experience is valuable, and all this hardship that we all go through, it will be rewarded after everything's over. Yeah.
Thank you, Aaron.
That's very good advice. Joyce, your transition to commercial?
Yes, thanks, Monash. Actually, to me as well, I feel what we learned in Monash is very applicable in the workforce. I can still remember like those accounting standards we learned actually applies when I first graduated and joined the company. And like, oh, okay, these are taught in uni. I know what are they. And I feel one thing, a lot of things that cover in Monash might not cover in other universities. That what I realized, like we have some, I can't remember what is the unit or subject I learned in Monash, but I know it cover. Like we have some IT, Excel, those kind of stuff. I can't remember.
Accounting information system.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
I realized a lot of university not covering that. Why?
Wow.
Because when I first joined the workforce, people start saying, what is this kind of formula? I'm like, okay, I know that because I learned in uni. Don't you guys the same? I said, no,
No.
we don't cover in uni. It's like a lot of people start to learn when they first join the working environment. Then I'm like, okay, no, I know that because I already covered during the uni time. So
Wow.
I said, actually, Monash, the subject that we cover actually kind of all-rounded, that I can feel that it's different and we really can use it when we come to the work. Yeah.
Can I just take this time? Thank you so much for coming and joining us in this session. And I'm so happy to see how you all have developed and where you all are now in society. It really makes us feel so proud. Prof. Neil, you can.
Totally agree. And the discussion today, I think, is a lot of rich advice and knowledge here. Especially we've gone through what we're going through this year, the discussion on inventory, the discussion on your challenges with working with different accounting standards, and lastly, your advice for students looking to get into the accounting profession. So valuable, so rich. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Aaron, and thank you so much, Joyce, for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And Dr. Shyamala and Dr. Janthi, thank you for making this happen. You two are a great asset to the teaching of financial accounting and auditing in Monash. So thank you all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Prof.
And
thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, Joyce. Thank you so much.
Same here.
For joining
Thanks,
me.
Benjamin, Aaron, and Joyce, for making time to be with us today.
Thank you for having
Thanks
us.
everyone for having us here today.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good
Bye.
evening. Bye. Bye.
Bye.